Is that the amendment be disagreed to, and I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Deputy Chair, just listening to the member for Moreton, it occurs to me that I think some things need to be put in context. The first of which is that the so-called cuts that he refers to were not cuts at all, but were the efforts of this government to stop the growth in expenditure in aged care. And why did we do that? Well, we did that because there are now 3 listed aged care companies, being Estia, Japara and Regis, who all in their prospectuses stated that their sustainable competitive advantage compared to those of their competitors was that they were better at filling out forms and gaming the system of funding that the federal government had instituted to maximise the amount of money that they got from the Australian taxpayer. So when I listen to the member for Moreton, who speaks so eloquently, as he always does, about the needs of those people who are not wealthy, those people who do not have access to unsustainable riches and class action lawyers and industry super and big unions, I am left to wonder why all of a sudden he's in favour of very wealthy listed companies in Melbourne getting access to untold riches from the taxpayer and us not being in a position, or this parliament not being in a position, to ask the question whether they deserved it or not, or whether they are actually providing the care. Is that the sort of bankruptcy, that sort of deep moral and intellectual bankruptcy that we are to expect from the opposition on every issue that this parliament deals with? That they would favour the interests of large listed corporations over that of people seeking care in aged care and nursing homes? Is that where we've got to in this parliament? Is that where we've got to in this country? They are no longer...
The member for McKellar will resume his seat. The member for Fenner on a point of order.
Deputy Speaker, I draw your attention to the state of the House.
Is quorum present? Quorum not present. Quorum call required. Quorum present. I call the member for McKellar.
Well, surprise, surprise. The Labor Party wants to shut down debate when we start talking about ideas, when we start talking about the endemic corruption of industry super, big unions and class action lawyers. That's what they're afraid of ideas. The member for Fenner talks and talks about ideas, but he doesn't want to hear the ones he needs to listen to, Deputy Speaker. Anyway, back to the speech. So what we had was, they've all gone now, so what we had was the situation where, and I'm really surprised the Labor Party, the member for Moreton, doesn't want us to be ensuring that taxpayer funds go to caring for people. Deputy Speaker, before I came to this place, I had a business that serviced and provided goods and services to the aged care sector. That business started roughly in 2004. My observations between 2004 and 2016 was that aged care in Australia actually became outstanding. When I would go to trade shows in the healthcare sector, whether they were in Germany, whether they were in China, whether they were in Taiwan, people from right around the world, I mean, it was nothing compared to the locations that James Bond went to. But it is fair to say that whenever you went to these particular trade shows, what you heard was people from every part of the world, when they were talking about aged care and the challenges that their nations faced. I mean, it is little known in this place that Germany has a proactive policy of relocating people who require care as they grow older. They have a policy that enables people to be cared for in the Czech Republic, and also in Thailand, because they simply do not have the resources or the people to enable them to undertake that care in Germany. When you go to China, China has a very large number of people about to get very old. And traditionally what happened in Chinese society was that those people would be looked after in the homes of their children. But of course, under the communist regime, you've had 40 years of a one-child policy, which means that this traditional care model for people in China as they become older has broken down. And so the Chinese government is looking for potential solutions for what they see as a crisis on their doorstep, a demographic crisis. And what they have done is, when they've looked around the rest of the world, what they have found is that Australia, in their view, Australia has one of the best systems in the world for caring for people as they get older. I think back to 2004, when I walked into my first aged care home, which was a Uniting Care aged care home in Croydon, and as the doors opened, the smell of ammonia that escaped was overpowering. I remember walking past at a Royal Freemasons home in Parramatta, a lady quite distressed because she had been calling for care for quite some period of time. But as the private sector came into the provision of aged care, quality and service went through the roof. I think of our care and an outstanding company, a company that has provided that really makes you sort of wonder, even as a sprightly 51-year-old, whether it would be okay for me to move into one of their facilities at Warriewood. I think of Signature Care, which is providing 4 and 5 star quality care in rural and regional settings that many of the not-for-profit providers, whether it be Uniting Care or otherwise, simply put, are not dedicating the resources to doing so. These organisations are providing incredibly good quality care, in terms of the services that you could provide. I think, personally, from my observation, the group that has done more to stop older Australians, our tribal elders, from getting the care they deserve is, in fact, this Parliament. We have heaped upon them regulation after regulation after regulation, so that innovative, entrepreneurial people who take caring seriously, take compassion for older people as their calling in life, have been prevented from providing different care, more care, services that people want by this Parliament, who's decided that the smartest 151 people in the world actually sit in this chamber. And we are so smart that we can tell you what care a person in Broome requires versus a person in the south of Hobart. We know that model of care from one end of this country to the other. But the truth is we don't. We don't. The people that the member for Moreton talks about, who are engaged on a daily basis in the provision of this care, know better than any of us ever will what an individual needs, requires and should have in terms of making sure that those last years of their lives are some of the most satisfying, or at least satisfying, that they can have. And so when this Parliament, and I was part of that vote, Deputy Speaker, referred aged care to a Royal Commission to investigate the problems that some aged care providers had been having, I have to say the thought went through my mind that can you think of a group less well-suited to undertaking this investigation than lawyers who are known for their care and compassion, based in Melbourne, and opining on the entirety of the aged care system in this country, a system that is globally seen as one of the best in the world, one that other nations want to replicate. And so it came to pass. Those opposite say, oh, you know, they're not interested or they're not accepting all of the recommendations of the Royal Commission. Well, let me tell you why. The two commissioners themselves disagreed. You had the Chief Health Medical Officer of Australia sitting in front of it, explaining to them, these are all the plans we had during COVID. And then you had counsel assisting, saying, oh, he didn't explain. There was no plan, which has enabled that, which was just not true. It just simply put was not true. So now we have this report that has come from a Royal Commission staffed by a bunch of lawyers who have, when the member for Moreton says how many people have spent time in aged care homes, well, I'll put my hand up, member for Moreton. I have spent a lot of time in aged care. I have seen the best and the worst providers of aged care throughout this land. And I know that the people who have been able to provide better care have been the private sector coming into this market, reimagining what it should look like. The people who have prevented them from providing even better care than that has been this Parliament, because we've told them what they can and can't do from Canberra rather than saying, we don't know. And when the member for Moreton says, oh, well, we've rejected provisions like 24-hour nursing, well, let me tell you why we did that. We did that because there are small towns dotted throughout this countryside who, if you brought in that provision, they would lose their nursing home. In other words, the people who want to be close to their loved ones, their wives, their husbands, in the last few years they have on this planet, would not be able to access an aged care home because this Parliament once again has decided, no, you can't have a perfectly good, caring, proper environment for your husband or your wife because you can't find a nurse to work 24 hours, even though you don't need a nurse, even though you're highly unlikely to ever require one. We should endorse this bill and we should vote for it, but most of all, we should support the best aged care sector in the world.
Has expired. The question is that the amendment be disagreed to, and I call the member for Warringah.